Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you would mind hitting the like button before we go on, that helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that a lot. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a question or an idea for a video, or you want to tell me how you do things, or whatever, I love to hear from you, so leave a comment. Periodically, one of my patrons over on Patreon asks me to show them how to do something, and I decided for this one that I would just go ahead and make a YouTube video so you could all benefit from it as well. But I like the idea. It's how to make a little cage, a necklace cage for a sphere. In this case, I'm going to be using a marble. You could certainly use a pretty bead, or you could use a stone sphere or something like that. But either way, we're going to give it a shot. It's going to have a hinge on the bottom, and it's going to have a double bail that the chain threads through on top to keep it closed. So before we start, I wanted to thank my patrons as my core group of supporters. I really appreciate your support. And I also wanted to thank my YouTubers. I have 21,500, almost 600 followers now on YouTube. So thanks for that. Thanks for all of your support. All right, well, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get over on my merch store. I have a number of different designs. This particular one has a useful chart on the back that converts from gauge to inches to millimeters, which I use pretty frequently. There's some other ones too that have other useful information on the back, but the primary purpose I like them for is to keep track of my projects as I come up with them. They have this nice grid in the background that I use to help me keep things kind of symmetrical. And I find it to be a pretty effective place to keep track of all of my projects. So this is today's, and it looks like an eyeball, sort of, now that I look at it. But it's going to have 6 bars in a circle. And I have this little marble here. It's the prettiest one I could find right now. If anybody knows where you can get small stone spheres like this that are undrilled, I'd love to be able to buy a few of those, because occasionally I want to make a setting that has a sphere in it. And I've never been able to find little ones like that. You can buy, they have people that a lot of people have sphere makers, but they make big stone spheres, and I want something small like this. So if anybody has a good supplier for that, let me know. So I measured this. It was about 17 millimeters, I believe, and this here is about 20, which fits around it pretty nicely. And I'm going to make everything out of 14 gauge square for the cage part, as well as the bail. And this is going to be 2 loops here, 1 loop down here, and they're going to hinge upwards and fit together there, and then the chain will go through. At least in theory, that's what I'm going to do. The hinge is going to be some tubing that I have that is 2.29 millimeters or 2.3 millimeters, somewhere in there, outside diameter, and a 14 gauge wire fits right in there, a round wire, which is 1.6 millimeters. So that'll be our pin, and that's about it. I think really the bulk of this is going to be making 3 identical circles like this, and then we're going to have to cut and fold 2 of them like that so that they're at a more of a 30-degree angle, or a 60-degree angle. I never can remember, but let's see, 360 divided by 60 is 6, right? So it would be a 60-degree angle. So so let's try that and see how it turns out. We'll start by making some loops here. I have some scrap 14 gauge. I think I probably have enough here to do at least 2 of them. Let's see. And I think I'll use my ring mandrel. Oh, before we get too far in also, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. I may use a little easy solder on the ends to solder the pin in just to be safe. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's a acetylene air torch. It draws in atmospheric air through these little holes on the side. And it burns hotter than a propane torch, but not as hot as an oxyacetylene torch. So it's great for silver. So I use a #1 tip as well. So I'm just going to make an overlapping ring here, like that. And with square wire, when you bend it, you have to kind of be careful because it tries to twist on you to bend more easily. So I think that's a little big still. Stretched it a little too far right away. I like to get it round down small on the mandrel down here below the size it needs to be, and then slide it up to the size. But that's pretty close right there, so I don't want the marble to roll around too much in there. I also want to make sure I have room to fit it in there. So that gives it a little space. That's just about perfect, I think. I think I'm going to cut this off right there. Cut this off right there. And just for this first one, I'm going to stretch it out so I can cut two more that are exactly the same size. You could probably do this all mathematically, but sometimes I find I get almost to the end and realize my calculations weren't quite right. That's always unfortunate. So let's cut 3 of these. See if I can find a third scrap layer. Guess not. Wasn't all that excited about breaking into my fresh piece since silver's so expensive right now. I do really appreciate all of my people who occasionally buy me coffees and super thanks. Those really keep me from running out of materials when it's expensive. I think at last I looked it was 36 something per ounce today, which is really high. Back when I first started doing this, silver was $4 a troy ounce. It was always, of course I was younger and didn't ever have any money, so otherwise I would have stocked up. But not that I have tons of money now. But kind of been wanting to do one of these sort of cage sort of things for a while. I haven't done a container piece for a bit. Probably my favorite one I ever did was my well, either just my traditional locket one, poison ring, or maybe the locket that looks like a book. So if you want to see any of those, I have a list called novelty pieces, so you ought to check that list out. It's got some interesting things that most of them have a feature of some sort that is different. Whether it's a locket or a spinner or a puzzle ring or whatever, there's some various things there. There's a reversible ring, which actually flips over and has a stone on the underside of the bezel, so you can wear it either way. That one's kind of fun. Those are all pretty close to the same size, so let's make them into circles. Remember how I said it's going to twist on you? I don't know if you can see that, but it always tries to do that, so we're going to correct it now before it gets too bad. That's big enough. Sure, that's just about right. So I'm actually going to line these two ends up so they're facing each other a little straighter. We'll solder those together. find that's a little bit easier than trying to file the angle perfectly. It goes, keeps it in a perfect circle. So let's get those all three ready. This will probably be a kind of an intermediate project just because it's got a hinge. And until you've done one or two of those, sometimes they can be a little bit challenging. I always try to encourage people to push themselves, you know. But I have in the past made the mistake of allowing some of my students, when I was doing in-person classes, to bite off more than they really could chew because they were so excited about something. And that was probably my bad. I shouldn't have let them try something more advanced than they really were ready for, because oftentimes that leads to frustration. More frustration than you should have at the beginning, maybe. Same way with, I tell people about bezels, which we're not doing today, but there's some challenges to making bezels when you're a beginner, and until you've made, 30 or 40 of them, I usually tell people not to get too despairing, because it takes a little while to get the hang of things and make them become routine. Where did you go, little tweezers? Right there. So I do something called pick soldering. I kind of missed I didn't heat it as evenly as I should have, and so most of the solder flowed to the one side of the gap, so I'm going to add a little bit. And this is pick soldering. It's one of those skills, when you get the chance to learn it, you should take the opportunity, because it's a useful way of getting stuff where you want it to go. Solder, specifically, stuff. Just filing off any excess solder that might be on the inside. On my last video, I forgot to turn on my side camera during part of it, and so I'm a little paranoid about that now. I've done that a few times in the past, and I went ahead and I put the video out even though a portion of it was a little missing, because I thought the project was a fun project anyway, and it wasn't too hard to figure out what I did off camera, so apologies for that. And I'm going to try and get these all in the same plane. Then I'll probably clean them up a little bit with the file. Okay, let's just kind of smooth everything out here. Rid of any excess solder. These are all pretty consistent. Okay, we're going to make one of these the center part, and the other two we're going to have to bend into a 60-degree shape. So let's have this be our centerpiece, and these two will bend in half. So you get these from Pepe Tools. I have an affiliate link in the description down below if you're interested. this center finder piece. I don't remember how much they are. They're pretty reasonable. I'm trying to put the solder joint kind of right where it's going to crease anyway. Okay, so here's my thought. I'm going to get that started with the saw maybe, just to get it lined up nicely. Just want to get a place for the file to bite into without skating around all over. So I get it pretty close to the center. Okay. Occasionally use this digital protractor, but any old protractor will probably work. I need 60-degree angles. So I want each of these to be bent inwards at about that angle. So at least I think that's what it should be. Let's find out. Okay, I'm going to use the corner of my bastard file here. Let's see where we're at now. That's probably close enough, I think. I want to solder this together so that it's a single piece again. It doesn't have that crack filed in it anymore. So I'm going to push this down in here a little bit so it can't move anywhere. This is one of those softer fiber boards. I think it's from Cool Tools. But many different companies have them. So. So I need to solder this down just like that. So I think I'm going to file this just a skosh so it's flat. Actually, I probably should look at it, file it a little bit more so that each side should come up to about that midpoint, I think. So we can take a little bit more off, I think. Could use a third hand to hold it in place, but I think it might work better if I use some T-pins just pushed into the pad. That's pretty good, actually. Possible that I filed deeply enough to where it's going to access that solder that's soldered between them. But I want to ensure that I have plenty on there, so. Okay, I bumped it and then I bumped it worse and then I pushed it back in place and I hope we're close enough. Well, that looks reasonably good. Once I do a little filing, I think it'll be alright. So I might do that and then we'll do this other one same way that we did the first one to get it to a 60-degree angle. And then we got to come up with a hinge apparatus as well as the bail part. So let me get this filed up. This is corrective filing. That's where Chad corrects what he screwed up. Kind of on this one I deliberately used a lot of solder. It's because I'm going to be attaching other stuff there. So let's cool that off and maybe we can file it a little bit. So here's what I think I'm going to do. For the hinge, I'm going to file it a little bit flat here, put a tube soldered on right there, pretty long piece, maybe I don't know, almost a centimeter. And on this one, I'm going to solder a piece of square wire, same thickness as this, up on top of this to create a place where I can solder a piece of tube on that sticks out just the right amount to match up with this one once I cut a piece out of there, and then we'll be able to put a pin in there. On the other side, we're going to need one side has to have 2 loops going up and one side has to have 1 loop going up, and they have to be able to overlap with each other. So I'm going to have to solder them on slightly offset further along that way. I'm thinking should I do circles or ovals or what should I do? The reason I'm filing this sort of flat is I want to be able to solder this along a length of the tube so it's down a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to cut a little piece of tube off of here. I'll be right back. Okay, so now we need to solder that right on there. So let's do that. I don't think this is probably going to move much, so I'm not going to probably spend a lot of time reinforcing it or anything. But I do want that right up there, centered on that thing. So I'm gonna sweat a little bit of solder on the outside of this tube, and then we'll just make sure they're both fluxed and butted up against there. I dropped the ball. But One thing you need to be careful about is picking these tubes up with tweezers when they're hot, especially that way, because sometimes they will crush. Nobody wants to try and make a hinge with a crushed tube. I think I need a little bit more solder in there in order to get it to lay down better. So I'm going to add a little more, just for giggles. I'm not sure where I picked up that particular little idiom. I think I've been saying that for a million years. No, I think let's go ahead and put a loop on this thing. We'll try and position it so it's a little offset to this side. I think that should be doable. Let's find some of that 14 gauge square I have left. I hope this polishes up nice. I think it probably will. Let's see. I think these might be kind of cool. I've been wanting to make another locket in some other design, but I'm struggling to think of something other than a book, you know, or something else that other people have done a lot of. If you have any ideas about that, let me know. I always appreciate ideas. So now when we put one of these on here, it needs to stick out to the front like this some, so that the loops will overlap when we put these two together. So I need to solder it about right there. So we'll try to do that. So if I push this about halfway in, very scientific, Jen. Well, let's take a look at that and see how it looks. That's pretty good, I think. We'll see. So I think we can put him to the side for a minute. Then we got to remember, well, not quite yet, but this is going to go like that. Now you can see why I need a piece above it, so that when I solder the tube onto this piece, it lines up with that tube, if that makes sense. So our first step is going to be soldering a piece of square wire right there, I think. Well, if you have a bad neck or something, this one requires a lot of hunching over. My neck isn't loving this today. Ah! Well, as they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So let's give this a try. It's not very straight. I'm going to have to try and push that down a little bit on this side. Nicely done, Chad. Let's see if that looks all right. That's a little better, I think. I can make that work. I think I did something backwards from what I intended to. I was going to put 2 on this one and 1 on this one because of the narrow end, but maybe I can make a little notch on either side here. Solder them on that way. Let's get this trimmed off and put a tube on there too. If you end up getting any solder inside of the tube, if you're new to doing hinges, probably your best bet would be to just cut it off and start over with that piece. You really don't want any excess solder in there, and it'll be hard to get your pin to go in there. Okay, I think we got him on there. Oh, I see what I did. Okay. I got the geometry wrong, Chad. You're a... I needed to solder it on this side here, not that side. So let's try that again. I'll leave that mess up in. That way you can be yelling at the screen, I think you're doing it wrong, Chad. We'll add an interactive feature to this video. I'm going to file this so it's kind of neatened up and everything. And then we'll mark off where we need to cut out of this here and get that neatened up as well. And then we'll put a pin in. And then I think we'll be able to decide how we can put those other 2 rings on. So got that kind of cleaned up. And I want to get a feel for how that's going to line up there. And what I did was I took... what I really need to do is mark where this tube needs to have sawed out so it'll have enough room to fit in there. So that's the section I need to take out of there. So I'm going to do that real quick. This is going to be a long video, so I'm going to skip showing you this. I'm just going to cut it down, and cut it across like that. Make sure it's cleaned up with the file. And then we'll fit these 2 together and see how they work. Okay, so I fiddled with this a lot until I got it to where it opens and closes pretty smoothly on that pin. The next thing I'm going to do is not the pin. That'll be the very last thing that I do. I'm going to go ahead and try and get these soldered in a good place. They line up there nice. So I may have to do a little filing on there to get that where I want it to be, but let me think about that real quick. I want it to be there. So just a slight angle downwards from the top on these, I think, maybe. Like I said earlier, I had intended to put the 2 rings on the bigger piece, but you know, sometimes plans change. And you could do it either way, I think. So let's see how this works. I'm just going to try and solder those on. And then maybe we can solder the pin in and we'll let it pickle. I'm always curious how other people do stuff like this. If you have a good trick or something you want to share, that's always nice. Usually when I'm doing something like this that I've not done before, after the fact I always think of something that I should have thought of, right off the bat. But, what are you going to do? Okay, so I got this I filed a little bit on the inside and on the outside of this. I played with the angles a little bit where I could. This one may need to come down a little bit more this way. This one sticks out a little more than the other, so maybe I'll file him just a little bit. So I haven't soldered this pin in yet, but that's going to fit right in there. That'll go like that. We got a little space, a little play, but that's okay. It's not going to fall out of there. Alright, so let's solder that in. I'm going to use just a little bit of easy solder. Just putting it right on the outside of that tube and on the pin. I don't really want it to flow very far, so I'm going to be super careful about this. Yep, we got a connection, at least on one side, no, on both sides, I guess. So we can just cut that off. You can either leave it like that or file it flush, whatever you choose. I'll be back in a few. Okay, so I got everything all kind of polished up. Everything fits pretty nicely together, so let's put our little marble in there. Just close that up. And we should be able to just run a chain through there. We have a nice little... I'm really pleased with that, I've thought about making something like this for a long time. I just never got around to it. I like that. Alright, so remember, if anybody knows a good source for like stone spheres that are this size, I'd love to do some of those. I think that would be fun. But let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was a sphere container pendant. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and go over to my main channel page. I have tons of content now. I'm getting close to 500 videos. I do 3 per week. I've been doing them since March of 2022, I think, or something like that. It's over 3 years now, and there's a lot of content built up over there, so I'm almost positive you'll find something else useful or entertaining. There's tons of projects and some techniques and all sorts of fun stuff, so check it out. Subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And if you want, hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. It's a great place over there with a lot of cool people. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other merch. There's some cups and t-shirts and things like that. And there's a link to buy my ebooks. The most recent one is 2024's. It includes a page for each of the tutorials I did in 2024, as well as additional information, difficulty ratings, things I learned from the project, and a link right to the video as well. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips. and a nice way to support my channel. So I appreciate in advance if you choose to buy that. So there's a package deal too. If you get both 2023 and 2024, it's $5 off for the two. So check that out. All right, well, thanks for coming today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.